He used to think that after 60, everything would slow down. Work wouldn't be so heavy. The kids would be grown. The house nearly paid off. Every morning would come with coffee. Every evening, someone waiting for him to come home. He didn't dream of much, just hoped that by then, life would be peaceful. No highs, no creases, just living in the space he had built with his youth. But then, things didn't go as planned. The divorce papers arrived on a weekday, not because of fights, not because of betrayal, just because she didn't want to live like this anymore. The house he once saw as the final destination suddenly became a piece of dispute. Lawyers, stamps, clauses, valuations. Everything divided like a business contract ending halfway. No more room for memories. Only one question: do you want to keep the house? Retirement plans. Plans to turn the garage into a reading room. Plans to plant flowers along the porch. All shattered after a 45-minute hearing, and he realized the nightmare wasn't divorce. It was no longer having a place to call home. He once thought having both names on the house meant trust, a sign of unity. The action of a man unguarded because love needs no defenses. He added her name because he thought it was right, because he believed someone who's walked through so many years with me surely won't turn away. And then he realized trust is beautiful, but trust without protection is naive. He was the one covering finances, from the first mortgage payment, to roof repairs after the storm, to replacing the AC, installing the kitchen, changing carpets. He always pulled out his wallet first, never calculated, but he never asked whose name is on the deed, if something happens, who stays, and who has to leave, because in his mind back then, everything was wrapped in one word: love. Love is trust. Trust is giving. Giving with no conditions, until the day he sat in mediation. The lawyer held up a copy of the ownership paper and said, "The house is considered marital property, but the right to stay will prioritize the one caring for the children or with clear residential needs." And in that moment, he wasn't the one prioritized. Even though he built that house, every brick, every beam, every month of overtime to pay the bank, no one was wrong. He just wasn't prepared. No separate retirement plan, no emergency savings, no backup place to retreat if needed, and he sat there, more clear-headed than ever, but too late. Not because of the loss, but because he realized he was wrong thinking stability was guaranteed. He used to think if he just paid the bills on time, the house would be his forever. But the law doesn't call that fairness. It calls it joint property. Joint property. And when things fall apart, he, the one who paid more than 80% of the loan, was the first required to leave. The reason was simple. She needs stability. So, the kids need a familiar environment. You can take care of yourself. And just like that, the man who held the house through countless storms was now the one looking for temporary shelter. He didn't want to trouble anyone. So, the first night after signing the agreement, he slept on an air mattress in a friend's garage, a friend also recently divorced. Shared a beer. No one said a word. They both understood. Each man there had once thought, that would never happen to me. A week later, he rented a cheap Airbnb. No closet, no kitchen, just enough space to breathe. A few months later, he bought an old RV, parked it outside Walmart every night, and told himself, at least, this place is mine. No one can kick me out anymore. But the truth is, everything now felt temporary. Sleep was no longer deep. Every morning, he had to ask himself, where can I park today without being warned? He once thought he could start over, but when income mainly came from a fixed pension, banks weren't eager to lend, didn't qualify for a new mortgage, no one willing to offer long-term rent without documentation, and he began to feel like an uninvited guest in his own life. No one pushed him out, but no one welcomed him in either. The worst part wasn't losing the house. The worst was realizing he no longer had the right to stand in the space he built with his own hands. No one taught him to prepare for this. No one said, protecting yourself doesn't mean you don't love. He used to think, starting a relationship with a contract meant love had no meaning. He didn't do a prenup, didn't ask about asset rights. didn't separate finances, didn't keep an emergency fund. Why? Because he trusted her, because he believed in a love built by time, not by paper, because he used to think, she's different. This relationship isn't like others. And then, when it all fell apart, he finally understood one thing. The law doesn't care about kindness. The law only looks at signatures, and his signature didn't protect him. Everything he saved merged under one name. Marital property. No more distinction of who contributed what, only division, half and half, or by the law. He once had a savings account, but merged it with his wife's, thinking it'd be easier for long-term plans. He once thought putting both names on the house was right. He once pooled his pension, investments, insurance, into one, the family. And now, every one of those is on a list for review. He didn't lose because someone took. He lost because he never imagined he could, because he trusted too much, because he was too simple, too naive in putting everything in one place and keeping nothing for himself. The price wasn't in the money lost, but in the moment he realized he had no way back. And the sentence that woke him up wasn't from a lawyer or a court. It was from a man sitting beside him in a cafe, also divorced. He said only one thing: no one thinks about the day they have to leave, until the door no longer opens from the inside. Early morning, he sat in the car, coffee still warm, same old cafe, same parking spot, but the feeling was no longer the same, because the place he once called home was no longer somewhere he was allowed to enter. Everything he once placed there, from the handmade desk to the little cactus on the windowsill, had been replaced. He was no longer in that picture. And the scariest part was that the picture still looked beautiful, just without him. He wasn't afraid to start again. He just feared he no longer wanted to, because starting from zero is easy, but starting again, knowing everything you built was erased. That's what makes people stop. He withdrew from relationships, not because anyone hurt him, but because he wasn't even sure who he was anymore. Didn't know what to say when there was nothing left to tell. Didn't know what he liked when every old passion was tied to a place and a person. He lived in the city he grew up in, but felt lost, like he'd just moved in. No one chased him out, but nowhere felt like it belonged to him anymore. Because losing a house isn't just losing a place to sleep. It's losing the last axis, the thing that defines stability, presence, and dignity. A man with no place to stand starts to wonder if he still belongs in anyone's life. And so, he went silent. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was nothing he felt needed to be heard anymore. He didn't blame her, didn't blame himself. But if he could go back, he wouldn't trust so blindly, forgetting to keep a place to stand. Splitting assets. Back then, those 3 words felt cold, like preparing to break up the moment love begins. But now he understands. Separating isn't division. It's to let each person keep their independence even while being together. If he had claimed part of the house legally, if he had requested clear terms instead of relying on feelings, then maybe, later, he wouldn't have left with nothing. No need to wait for conflict. No need to wait for cracks. Just a simple agreement, a clear line in the deed. That would have been enough to keep a door open for himself. He also realized everyone needs a plan B, not to leave, but to not freefall if things fall apart. Maybe a small studio under your name, a cabin far from the city, or just enough to rent an apartment for 6 months. No one wants to use it, but if needed one day, at least he wouldn't have to crash with anyone. And the most important thing was a separate financial channel, not to hide, not to guard, but to have the right to choose, the right to leave properly, the right to walk away without losing everything. He used to think keeping money for himself was selfish, but now he understands. Giving everything and keeping nothing isn't love. It's erasing yourself, and no one deserves to live like that. Not him, not any man quietly carrying a life where there's no room for them. He lives in a small studio, window, facing a parking lot. No backyard, no living room, just enough for a small dining table, a chair, and a single bed. Every morning, he makes coffee with an old machine, folds his blanket, plays music, cleans up, stays silent, and strangely, he doesn't feel lonely, because for the first time in years, he's not living on edge. No one asks where he's been, what time he got home. No one brings up yesterday's mistake. No one asks him to adjust just to keep the house calm. He only has to keep himself calm, and that is enough. Many people think losing a house means losing everything. But maybe losing a big house to find a small, peaceful corner is the truest restart. This studio may not be an achievement, but it's a new route, a place where no one can kick him out. No explanations, no proof, no begging to exist. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be beautiful, just has to be his. Because in the end, freedom isn't about the size of your home. Freedom is knowing, no matter what, you still have a place to stand. If you've gone through a breakup and walked out of it, with no keys to any door you once knew, if you've folded up your old life and asked, where do I begin when I no longer have a place called home? Then you're not alone, and you're not wrong. That's not failure. That's a quiet turn for you to rediscover something more important than any roof ever over your head. It's an inner place no one can take from you. If you've ever been in that position, leave a comment, just one sentence. I lost a house, but I'm building a place of my own. Because sometimes, losing a place to live is the beginning of finding a place to belong. If you found this video meaningful, please share and subscribe to the channel to get future updates. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.